My name is Steve, and I'm a grateful recovered crack addict.
Hey, Steve.
And tonight's workshop is going to be an introduction to the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous as they relate to the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And first of all, I want to share with y'all that I consider it an honor and a privilege to be associated with people like y'all. I am absolutely startled and I admire the incredible commitment that each of you have made. This commitment to recovery is not an easy one, and however, it is the most rewarding commitment that I've ever made. And I feel very strongly that each of you, as you progress down this pathway of spirituality, that you too are going to realize that this was by far the best decision that you ever made. And I often look back on my early childhood, my first introduction to alcoholism. I had family members that suffered from alcoholism. I had an Uncle Kenny, and I'm sure a lot of you have had an alcoholic uncle in your life. And I remember that he was really bad about going into the DTs. Now, this was back in the 70s, in the early 70s, before they had any real treatment for alcoholism. The basic treatment programs that existed back then were lock you up in a psychiatric institution and put you on psychotropic medications, and they had some other wonderful philosophies of recovery like electric shock therapy or the belladonna treatment. And Uncle Kenny was bad about going into DTs, and I remember as a small boy sitting around the kitchen table at my Aunt Claudia's house, and all of a sudden, out of the clear blue, Uncle Kenny would jump up with a broom and he'd go to swatting. He'd be swatting in there and said he was killing rats. Except I didn't see any rats. And but as good fortune would have it, Uncle Kenny ended up in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember a couple of years later, and I guess he'd been sober about 3 to 6 months, somewhere in that neighborhood. We were sitting around the kitchen table at Aunt Claudia's house, and all of a sudden, an itty-bitty mouse went across the side. You know how you catch it out the corner of your eye? And everybody saw the mouse, and everybody looked at Uncle Kenny, and he said, "I bet y'all thought I saw that, but I didn't." You know, a lot of people don't have to worry about the DTs because of all the wonderful detox programs that we have in our country today. And there are some medications that, because a lot of alcoholics died during heart failure during DTs. Delirium tremens, they call it. And this kind of leads me to what I want to talk about first tonight before I get into introducing the 12 steps, is just a little bit of history about Alcoholics Anonymous. And you know, in 1955, the published success rate in Alcoholics Anonymous read like this: of those who came to AA and really tried, 50% got sober at once and remained that way. 25% sobered up after some relapses. And among the remainder, those who stayed on with AA showed improvement. Now, I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous in May of 1986. And for the next 20 or 25 years, I guess, belonged to basically the same group. And I assure you that we could not claim any success rate even close to 50% getting sober at once and staying that way. And nationwide, there has been a demise of the overall success rate in Alcoholics Anonymous, where nowhere close to 50% getting sober and staying that way. Now, I will say to you that there are some reasons for the demise of the success rate in Alcoholics Anonymous. In the early 1970s, Congress allocated approximately $1 billion to the NIAAA program for profit institutions to open up treatment centers to deal with the drug problem. President Nixon declared a war on drugs. And Vietnam veterans and people here alike were coming home addicted to heroin, to alcohol, to marijuana, and to cocaine. Now, each of these treatment centers, depending on where they were at geographically, had their own set of rules and their own treatment plan. And however, these centers did not offer a bona fide treatment program, because by its very definition, the word program is a planned, precise sequence of events that occur that bring about a conclusion. What these treatment centers had was more like an elaborate treatment schedule. 9 o'clock, advanced basket weaving. 11 o'clock, moccasin making. 1 o'clock, group therapy. But no planned, precise sequence of events that bring about the conclusion of sobriety. Now, there's one thing universal in all of these treatment centers, is when you get ready to quote, graduate their program, they all tell you to go to a 12-step program. So by the hundreds of thousands, people entered into the doors of AA, NA, and CA. And you know, it's a fact that not everybody that uses cocaine is a real addict. Not everybody that gets a DUI is a real alcoholic. However, in this society, if you go to court with a drug charge or with a DUI charge, part of your sentence for judges all over the country, they would sentence you to Alcoholics Anonymous. So now we get people coming to our fellowship that don't really have our illness. And all they really have to do for things to get better for them is not drink, not use, and go to meetings. The law gets off their case. The wife gets off their case. And what do they find when they come into the doors of AA? An extremely attractive fellowship where people are saying, keep coming back. We love you. This is an attractive bunch. I'm here to tell you, especially if you like chaos. You can certainly find some rich chaos in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. So, my point, when you get somebody into our fellowship that doesn't really have the qualifications to be here, and you know there's no real rule makers and nobody in charge, so really anybody can come. Fast forward 15 years and now that person's a old timer. And then along comes somebody like me or somebody like you, desperate, dying from the illness of addiction. You come piling into the doors of AA, begging for help, and they give you what worked for them. Just don't drink and go to meetings. How many of y'all have been involved in AA before coming to this treatment center? Raise your hand. Wow, just about the entire crowd. How many of y'all heard the advice, just don't drink and come to meetings? Good advice, wasn't it? It is good advice. I'm not being sarcastic. It's good advice for a very short amount of time. But until the alcoholic begins to learn how to treat his or her disease correctly, the just don't drink and go to meetings plan will not take you to where you're wanting to go. And I was so frustrated because I really tried the just don't drink and go to meetings plan. I went to 3 meetings a day and I stayed clean and dry for 16 months. But all of a sudden I found myself drunk and high. And I could offer no satisfactory explanation why. Things in my life were going great. I was doing better in business than I'd ever done. My family, I just had a new baby. You know, they said, don't make any major decisions for that first year. So I didn't. I just got married, had a baby, bought a house, and opened 8 check cashing stores. So it's important for each of us to know that this recovery process is twofold. We have the fellowship that supports us, the meetings, the activities in the fellowship, very important. But meetings alone will not treat the illness of addiction. If they did, we'd have gotten clean and sober a long time ago. The very first time we ever decided we were going to do 90 meetings in 90 days. Now, there are a number of back to the basics movement in Alcoholics Anonymous throughout this country. In Little Rock, Arkansas, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Los Angeles, California, and right here in Florence, South Carolina. This facility is at the forefront of the back to the basics movement in Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay? You see, there are 2 Alcoholics Anonymouses. There's Alcoholics Anonymous, the fellowship, and then there's Alcoholics Anonymous, the program. And the program is found in the first 103 pages of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It is a precise, specific, and exact set of instructions on how to properly implement the 12 steps in your life. The 12 steps are a pathway to sobriety. And if you would have sat me down some 14 and a half years ago and said, if you work this program, all you're going to get is the obsession to drink removed. You ain't going to get your family back. You're not going to particularly be happy. You ain't going to get your driver's license back or your standing in the community. But the obsession to drink will be lifted. I would have said, where do I sign? I heard an old man say one time, when you first come into this program, break out a piece of paper and use your wildest dreams and imaginations. Write down where you'd like to be in 10 years if you could have it. And I want to make this point very clear. I would have sold myself way short. I would have sold myself so short. This program has given me more than I could have ever dreamed of. Powerful. Let's talk about the 3 goals. Actually, there's 3 goals of 12-step recovery. Goal number 1 is identify the problem. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, hell, I know what my problem is. I got an alcohol and drug problem. Well, if you've got an alcohol and drug problem, the solution is simple. Just don't do them anymore. But we've already, by a show of hands, looked at those of us that have tried the just don't do it anymore plan, and none of us were successful. Am I right?
Yes.
We have to identify the real problem. Dr. Silkworth identified the real problem as being an illness of the body and an illness of the mind. The illness of the body he characterized as a physical allergy. An allergy is defined as an abnormal reaction to a common substance. And I thought to myself, I'm allergic to crack. I never recall breaking out into hives or sneezing or a runny nose because the manifestations of this allergy are very different from the one used in this context. Our allergic reaction takes place inwardly, cannot be seen. It's not an outward manifestation. It's also important to understand what triggers the allergic reaction. What triggers the allergic reaction is putting a substance in you. And by putting a substance in us, our bodies simply metabolize these chemicals differently than non-addicts. For example, when my mother drinks a beer, she simply gets full. But when I drink a beer, a metamorphosis, a chemical metamorphosis takes place during the metabolism breakdown. And I'll just show you, I'll use alcohol as the example. But when a normal person takes a drink of alcohol, it's entered through the mouth, down the esophagus, into the stomach, where it's turned into acetaldehyde. And then as it reaches the small intestine, it's further broke down to acetone. And then it's filtered through the liver and the kidneys, and it's gone at the rate of about 1 ounce of alcohol per hour. That is the normal metabolic rate for the consumption of alcohol. Now, for the people that have the addiction gene, people like me, when I take a drink of alcohol, in between the acetaldehyde and acetone breakdown, the metabolism slows way down, almost to a stop. And then my brain secretes a chemical called tetrahydroxyquinoline, or THIQ. THIQ deposits itself on the limbic system, or the pleasure center of the brain, depleting the brain supply of serotonin. You got two basic chemical reactions happening in the brain, and one is dopamine release and the other is serotonin. Dopamine says, I want, gimme, I want. You feel it when you're very hungry. You have a dopamine release that says, I want some food. Serotonin is the chemical that says, thank you, I've had just enough. THIQ depletes serotonin. So all you got is I want, and no, thank you, I'm okay. We know that as the cycle of craving. It happens every time we put the substance in us. Dr. Silkworth called it the phenomenon of craving. Once we start, there's no predicting we're going to stop. Just out of curiosity, how many of you, when you were 11 years old, went to show and tell and said, when I grow up, I want to do drugs and ruin my family? Anybody? We don't plan on this, do we? You know, the phenomenon of craving is what kills us. Chris Farley, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, River Phoenix, Kurt Cobain. What do these folks got in common? They're all dead. They were all addicts with an unlimited supply of money. Where would you all be if you won the $10 million lottery the day before coming to the Owl's Nest? I'd have to hire a bodyguard. I'd kill the bodyguard. You know. I would give my sister half of my paycheck and say, under no circumstances are you to give me this money. 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm pounding on her door. You know, screaming at her, threatening to kill her if she doesn't give me the money. Anybody ever done that shit? The phenomenon of craving. The phenomenon of craving. Let me ask you all this question. How many of y'all have broke the law during the phenomenon of craving? Okay. How many of y'all have violated your morals during the phenomenon of craving? All of us. Okay. The illness of the body is not getting any better, y'all. It's progressive. It gets worse over time, never better. Because when I first started using dope, I didn't go on these 3 to 5 day runs. I could do it until it was gone that night and kind of force myself to go to bed. But as I got older, days turned into weeks, turned into months. I mean, I didn't even know where I was because the illness was progressing. Now, Well, another analogy that I like to use to describe the illness of the body is an allergic reaction like no other. Some people have a shellfish allergy. Suppose we go out to eat on Tuesday night and I eat some shellfish and all of a sudden my throat swells up. I turn blue. I fall. I keel over. A physician at a nearby table runs over with a steak knife and opens up an emergency airway and saves me. I just had a near-death allergic reaction to shellfish. Now, what logical conclusion can I draw from my near-death reaction to shellfish? I can't eat it. I can't eat shellfish. I can't use shellfish. I can live a normal life. I just can't use shellfish. And then you go up there to visit me in the hospital and I got the thing sticking out of my throat. And they're like, damn, man, you scared the hell out of me. And I'm like, I know. And then I sing the national anthem of addicts. I'll never do that shit again. Okay, and you're like, well, no shit. So I get out of the hospital the next day, and Friday, I call you. And I say, I got some shrimp, come on over. What would you think of me? Would you say I had an illness of the mind? How about if you said, what are you, nuts? That stuff almost killed you. And how about if I say, I know, eating shrimp on Tuesdays is whipping my ass. I'm only going to eat it on the weekends from here on out. Replace shellfish with cocaine. I snorted so much cocaine when I was 19 years old that I had a seizure. I didn't know it was called a massive brain seizure caused from acute cocaine toxicity. That 1 in 10,000 survive a massive brain seizure caused from acute cocaine toxicity. It was a very scary moment, especially for the people that are around me that saw me turn blue and gasp for air. But as soon as I came around, drank a beer, I snorted another line of cocaine. I was standing in my check cashing store. Now, it's not good to have a crack cocaine habit and own a check cashing store. I was my best customer. I wrote bad checks to myself. At least I didn't go to jail. So I'd been up for 3 days snorting cocaine, and things were really hazy and foggy, and all of a sudden I opened my eyes and I was in the back of an ambulance. And I was gasping for air. And I was trying to speak, to tell them to please don't let me die. But I couldn't talk. And I get to the hospital, and they stabilized me by injecting Valium and some other stuff in me to bring my heart rate down. And I couldn't talk because I'd bitten half my tongue off. And the female doctor came in there, and she had a pamphlet, and it said MBS on it. Massive brain seizure. And she opened up the thing, and she had a part of it highlighted, and it said 1 in 10,000 survival rate. That was my 5th one. The insanity. Every time I said I was never going to do that again, I meant it. What I didn't know is that I was caught in the grip of a continuing and progressive illness that no human power could relieve. It did not matter how much I wanted to not do it. I could muster the most energy there is to never do it again, and that would mean nothing in the moment of truth. And this was the first lesson that I got in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, step 1. You see, as a result of the illness of my body, I can't use. But as the result of the illness of my mind, I can't quit. I'm damned if I do use, and I'm damned if I don't. It is a no-win, lose-lose, hopeless scenario. You cannot think it away. You cannot pray it away with just prayer by itself. Prayer without action is meaningless. It cannot be reasoned with or bargained with. If you have it, it's not going away. Ever. This is the hopeless truth. In the textbook of Alcoholics Anonymous, the word hopeless or hopelessness is used 29 times in the first 103 pages of the book. The word doomed is used 3 times. And until an alcoholic or an addict accepts this devastating weakness, there can be no hope of recovery. It will just be continued chaos, drama, and eventual using and drinking. And the progression will move on from there. And I've seen handsome young gentlemen turn into old men very quickly. And I have seen beautiful young ladies turn into old women very quickly. This thing takes no prisoners. It does not discriminate. It does not care about your background, what color you are, how much you wear, what your gender is. If you've got it, it has only one mission: to kill you slowly. Death would have been a welcomed proposition for me, living in that homeless lot with the mosquitoes biting the hell out of me, weighing 135 pounds, being estranged from my family, having a murder charge hanging over my head, being a 3-time convicted felon, driver's licenseless, jobless, penniless, and not a friend in the world, because I burnt every bridge with my selfishness and dishonesty. So death, that would have been the easy way out. You know, I used to have doctors tell me, if you use one more time, you're going to die. I've heard that lots. But I often wonder how I would have took it if a doctor sat me down and said, now listen carefully. If you use one more time, you're not going to die. You're going to live and suffer. If that wouldn't have changed things for me. So, the business of identifying the real problem, it has to come altruistically, because alcohol and drugs doesn't teach us the truth about what's wrong with us. Alcohol and drugs teaches us something very different. What we learn from alcohol and drugs is the lesson of the very first high. The very first time we ever got good and high on something. What did our brain learn? How wonderful this is. I felt a sense of completeness second to none. You see, my entire life has been a search for wholeness or completeness. And I found a chemical wholeness with alcohol and drugs. So imagine how offended I was at age 17 when my family insisted that I go to treatment because I had a drug problem. We don't have drug problems. We've got a spiritual problem with a drug solution. So, goal 1 is identify the problem. The real problem is this hopeless condition of mind and body. Goal 2 is identify the solution. You know, there's a lot of truths in life. And one of them is the problem defines the solution. Our understanding of a problem is what defines our solution. But there's a catch with that life truth. An imperfect understanding of a problem will define an imperfect solution every time. In other words, if we're in a boat and we're sinking, and we identify the problem as being too much weight, what logical solution is defined by that? What do we need to do? Get rid of the weight. You see how quickly you come to the solution once you understand the problem? Well, how would we feel if we pitched the newcomers overboard only to find out that the real problem was a small hole in the bottom of the boat we could have easily plugged? An imperfect understanding of a problem defines an imperfect solution. When I got here, I thought I had an alcohol and drug problem. And it defined, don't use. Only that didn't work. Our problem is defined as lack of power. Page 45 in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous says, lack of power, that was our dilemma. The word dilemma is defined as a choice between two shitty choices. Or a dilemma is defined as an unsolvable problem. So, if lack of power is the problem, what one-word solution defines what we need?
Power.
We need power. This is the problem and the solution. Listen carefully to what I'm about to say. Step one is a statement of the problem. Step two is a statement of the solution. Step three is a decision to seek the solution. You don't turn your will and your life over in step three. You make a decision to move in the direction of turning your will and life over in step three. Because you got wall steps. Somewhere somebody hung the 12 steps up on the wall. But they didn't hang the directions for them up there with them. Those directions are found in the first 103 pages of the textbook Alcoholics Anonymous. Step three, a decision to seek the power. How do we seek it? Steps 4 through 9. That's what brings the solution about. This is what creates wholeness and peace and freedom and sobriety. This nagging thought that this time when I use, it's going to be wonderful like it was when I was 13 is gone. Because we're no longer seeking a chemical wholeness. Now, the hole in us the size of God, there's only one thing that fits there. God. You know, this 10, 11, and 12 is how we stay in the solution. So to recap, goal 1, identify the problem. The real problem is this hopeless condition of body and mind. A no-win, lose-lose, hopeless scenario. No human power could relieve us of our alcoholism. Page 60, big book. We had to find a power greater than ourselves. Step 3 is a formal commitment to search for the needed power. How do we search for it? By following the instructions in steps 4 through 12 to the very best of our ability. The big book says, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, that the promises will always materialize if we work for them. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity. We will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Thank you all for letting me speak tonight.